Like I said, tonight we're starting a two-part sermon series. First part will be in December, and then the second part will be in January. And if you saw tonight's sermon title, it's Faith Like an Adult. And so you can probably guess what January's will be. It will be Faith Like a Child. But we'll get to that in January. You'll have to wait a whole month till we get to that. But tonight, it's Faith Like an Adult. And do you remember when you became an adult? Or do you remember what moment in your life where you thought, okay, this is when I'm an adult? Or you look back and you think, okay, yeah, at that point in my life was when I really felt like an adult. And so I posed that question out on Facebook a couple weeks ago, and just to kind of see, what were the responses I would get? When did people feel like they became an adult? And a lot of responses focused on major life events. Graduating from high school, graduating from college, getting married, getting your first kind of adult job, birth of a first child. Others focused on getting new responsibilities. So maybe it was, you get that first electric bill in the mail, or you paying a mortgage, or just paying bills. Others said leaving home, or just being out on their own. So maybe it was going to college, joining the military, but being separated from their parents and making their own decisions. But among all the responses, there were two things I noticed. One was that almost everyone said that there was a process involved in being an adult. Everyone talked about, okay, I felt like I had kind of become an adult at this point in my life, and then I kind of really became more of an adult later on, just kind of as I grew and matured. And so it seemed to be there was this process of maturing or becoming an adult. And so that was the first thing. And then with such a variety of responses, I think, you can tell that there was no clear moment when we can say for everyone that when this happens to you, it is guaranteed you are now an adult. And so just kind of this idea of faith like an adult, I don't want to jump too far ahead into our sermon right now, but, those two ideas that there's a process, I think we can all agree that our faith, maturing in our faith, it's a process, that it's not from this moment on, it's the same. My faith is the same, or I'm at this constant, consistent level, like, okay, once I get to this point in my faith, I'm good for the rest of my life. And I think we can also say that it's not that growth and maturity, or becoming mature in our faith, is not the same for everybody. Now, we could look at two different people, or two people in the same church even, or two teenagers that are growing up in the same youth group. You can see, okay, it's different for everybody, and that's okay. That we don't have to compare ourselves, and we shouldn't compare ourselves and think, oh, I need to be where that person is, or they need to be where I am, because we're all different. And what makes those different, or that the process of maturing, becoming an adult is different, is because we all have different life situations. Some people, in their responses on Facebook, they talked about that they had to go work when they were 14 and help pay bills for their parents. That person had to grow up possibly a lot quicker than someone who didn't have to go get a job when they were at 14. Instead, they were off playing video games or something at 14. And so different life situations influence when we mature physically, but then also certain life situations influence how and when we mature spiritually. But even though all the answers were different, there was a common theme, and it was that growing up is inevitable. It's going to happen. Every child eventually grows up. Now, sometimes they grow up physically faster than they grow up mentally. Sometimes you think, oh, they didn't grow up as fast as they should, or, we say things like, act your age, not your shoe size, to kids sometimes. We think, oh, you're a freshman in high school, you should be acting this way, but they're still acting like they're in 6th grade. And then sometimes we turn around and realize, wow, when did this kid get so much older? Or, they do things that surprise us, and you think, wow, that's showing a lot of maturity for someone your age. But time moves on. We all grow up physically, and it's a guarantee, for the most part, that we will all also grow up mentally. It's a guarantee. But growing up spiritually is not always a guarantee. Sometimes we meet someone in the church and we realize they haven't really grown up yet. And when we think of growing spiritually, one of the go-to standard verses is found in Hebrews chapter 5. That's where we're going to begin tonight. Hebrews chapter 5, verse 11. The author writes, "We have much to say about this, but it is hard to make it clear to you because you no longer try to understand." I like that wording, because you no longer try to understand, this idea that you've just become stagnant. You've given up. In fact, though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you the elementary truths of God's Word all over again. You need milk, not solid food. Anyone who lives on milk, being still an infant, is not acquainted with the teaching about righteousness. But solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. Therefore, let us move beyond the elementary teachings about Christ and be taken forward to maturity, not laying again the foundation of repentance from the acts that lead to death and of faith in God, instruction about cleansing rites, the laying on of hands, the resurrection of the dead, and eternal judgment. Here in Hebrews, the author is writing to Christians with a Jewish background, and he's basically getting on to them for not growing in their faith. He says they should be more mature in their faith. They should be teaching others, but they are still learning the basics. They're having to have the basics retaught to them. They're still getting those foundational items. As the author puts it, they're still needing the spiritual milk. I remember a couple years ago, we had only been here, it was about 6 months, and I was teaching the teen class on a Wednesday night. We were going through Hebrews, and we came to this verse, and so we were talking about this idea of growing, maturing your faith, milk versus food. And so I got one of the teen boys to come up and be a guinea pig for me. And so I asked the kids, what is the very first food you eat as a child? And you get different, and finally you come to milk, and they all say, oh yeah, milk. And so we had milk. It was, I think I ended up getting like powdered milk, but I said it was like infant milk or infant formula. And so I was like, all right, you have to drink this. And so they drank it. And then I was like, okay, what's next? What's the next thing you eat after milk as you get older? And then they obviously said, oh, baby food, And so I took out a jar of baby food, the mashed peas and carrots and the real good stuff. And so, I got a teenage boy, and so all the teenagers, they're all like, waiting for him to eat it, and he takes a bite and, gross face. And so we're talking about it's become more advanced. This food, it's become more complex. It's still not super advanced, it's mushy, but it's a bit more complex than milk. And then we said, all right, now as an adult, let's say, or a teenager at least, you've got teeth now, you can actually chew food, and so you move on. And so then for him having to eat the infant milk and eat the baby food, I'd grilled a steak for him that day. And so a teenage boy, he's like, oh yeah, steak. And so, we gave him a steak, something that was very complex to chew. You had to chew on it a while. You couldn't just throw it in your mouth, gum it, and then swallow. But you had to chew on it. And so just driving home this idea that you don't want to stay eating milk. You don't want to stay eating the mushed up peas and carrots. You want to go on to the steak or the hamburger. And so that's what we're going to address tonight, this idea of maturing in our faith, having faith like an adult. In 1 Corinthians 13, Paul says that when he was a child, he acted like a child, but he put away the childish things when he became a man. We all must grow spiritually. Proverbs 22:6, it says, "Start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it." And so why do we grow spiritually? Why do we need to grow spiritually? Why can't we just stick with the milk? Make life easy? Well, we stay there, or we mature in our faith so that we can stay the course. In Proverbs 22:6, it says, "Start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it." If we mature in our faith, as we mature in our faith, it becomes easier to stay the course. That when life comes, when those moments in life that want to shake us or rock us, because we've matured in our faith, it's easier for us to stay the course. We begin that spiritual journey as a literal child, or as a child in Christ, as a new Christian, but we grow in our faith in order to stay strong in that faith and to not depart. We stay committed, stay in the path so that we can keep on, but it's not just for our benefit that we grow. It's not just so that it's for my own personal benefit, but we mature so that we can help others, because we have a responsibility to others. Hebrews chapter 5, verse 12, the author says, "In fact, though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you." The author says that they should be teaching others. They should be teaching others those foundational things, instructing others, but they still need to be taught themselves. So we have a responsibility to grow in our faith so that we can then help others grow, that we can instruct and teach one another. That is our responsibility. And that word comes up a lot when we talk about becoming an adult. That word responsibility. On my Facebook survey, not everyone said responsibility, but all the things they talked about had to do with responsibility or being more responsible. And when I put forth the question on Facebook, I thought to myself, okay, when did I become an adult, or when did I think? And my dad, when I was growing up, he always told me, you become an adult when you pay your own health insurance. That's what my dad, so that was always like for me, like I was like, all right, I'm an adult. But I remember, when Jessica and I, we got married right out of college and moved to Missouri. And I remember that first summer that we were married, we were in an apartment, and I loved it when bills came. Because I felt like an adult, that responsibility. I was like, oh yeah, writing a check to the city of Columbia, and it's just, crazy things that, and then obviously 6 months later that the excitement died very quickly. But I think I really felt like an adult. If I was to really think, okay, when did I feel like an adult? It was when other adults and people that were older than me viewed me as an adult. For example, when we were in Missouri, fresh out of college, I think back, I'm 22 years old. This church, hired me. They hadn't had a youth minister before. They hired me. 22, I had no idea what I was doing. I still hardly know what I'm doing sometimes. But they hired me to, be a youth minister. And within a month of being there, I was taking the kids to Arkansas in a van for church camp at Harding. And looking back, I'm like, they trusted me, a 22-year-old with 6 teenagers crossing state lines. I had Jessica with me, but I don't quite know how much that really helped. But I think they took a risk in that, but they trusted me with that responsibility. And I brought back those kids and Jessica alive, no injuries, no problems. And the more they got to know me, I got to know them, the more they treated me like an adult, the more they trusted me with responsibility. I remember the preacher there, Brian Hagesack, we'd work together, and I could just see more and more, just as the years went on, entrusting me with more and more responsibilities. And that's the key for having responsibility, is that you have to prove that you can handle responsibilities. And when you can prove that you can handle responsibilities, you are then trusted with more responsibilities. And that goes back to this idea of progression into adulthood that many of the people on Facebook talked about. That you get more and more responsibilities, you mature more and more. And I think that word defines being an adult. And really defines what we're talking about when we say faith like an adult. And the word is more. Think about it. When it comes to being an adult and maturing, whether it's from toddler to child, or child to adolescent, or to college student, and then to adult, the word more keeps coming up. They are trusted with more. They have more freedom. They're able to do more on their own. And so tonight, as we talk about faith like an adult in true preacher fashion, I got 3 areas where we, as mature Christians, have to deal with more. And so, as we mature in our faith, one area that requires more is we have to be more responsible. We have to learn how to be responsible with relationships and show maturity in situations. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, you can turn there in your Bibles. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 1. If any of you has a dispute with one another, do you dare to take it before the ungodly for judgment instead of before the Lord's people? Or do you not know that the Lord's people will judge the world? And if you are to judge the world, are you not competent to judge trivial cases? Do you not know that we will judge angels? How much more the things of this life? Therefore, if you have disputes about such matters, do you ask for a ruling from those whose way of life is scorned in the church? I say this to shame you. Is it possible that there is nobody among you wise enough to judge a dispute between believers? But instead, one brother takes another to court, and this in front of unbelievers. The very fact that you have lawsuits among yourselves means you have been completely defeated already. Why not rather be wronged? Why not rather be cheated? Here Paul's talking about dealing with relationships with one another in the church. And he says to them, the fact that you are suing each other, the fact that you can't get along is a disgrace. And he says, in fact, it's better for you to be wrong, to admit defeat, to just let it go, than for there to be divisions among each other. This reminds me of a news story that Jessica pointed out to me a couple weeks ago. It was just kind of one of those, just kind of sidebar. But you had 2 moose. They were fighting, with their antlers, fighting each other. One, it was up in the north. One ended up dying. And their antlers got interlocked. And so that other one who lived, was stuck to the dead one. And like I said, it was up north. They were in a river. The river ended up freezing that day, and both both moose died. And you read that and you're like, okay, what's that got to do? How many times are we choosing to get in an argument when nothing good really comes out of it? Another story. A friend of mine told me this story of a church. I don't know what church it was at. But it was after services one Sunday morning. He had two deacons and their wives. They were discussing carpet color and paint color. They were up at the front of the auditorium. So, it was after services, but, it's pretty central. And they had, kind of a communion table like this, only it was down in the front. And so they're standing looking at samples. They've got it on top of the table, looking at samples, and it got a little heated. So much so that one of the deacons winds back and punches the other deacon straight in the jaw. Don't miss the irony here that they are standing over something that represents the love that Christ had for us and what unifies us as a body. Two examples about getting upset over little things. Part of having a mature faith is looking past those little things so that we don't miss the big issue. So we learn more about having responsibility with our relationships, but then we also mature in our faith so that we are able to face more. More responsibility, and then also face more. 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 5, Peter writes, "For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith." Add to your faith, this idea of growing. Add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge. All right, we see knowledge. We talked about them, moving on from milk to solid food. To knowledge, self-control. That doesn't have anything to do with what we just talked about. Self-control, and to self-control, perseverance. And to perseverance, godliness. And to godliness, mutual affection. And to mutual affection, love. But perseverance, this idea of keep going. And we never have to persevere in easy times. We never think of persevering when we're having fun. We never think of persevering when we're on the beach. You never have to persevere when you're on vacation. Well, maybe if you're on certain vacations with your family. But we never think of persevering in the good times, during the party, when things are going smooth. Perseverance carries with it this connotation, this idea of trials or struggles. We have to persevere when life is tough. James chapter 1, verse 2, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." Some of you have gone through a lot in your life. You've had serious struggles. And we've all gone through hard times. And whatever we faced, it's a lot like surgery. And this is what I mean by that. I've used this analogy before. But you tell someone, "Oh, I'm having surgery on whatever," whether it's leg, back, hip, heart, whatever. And they say, "Oh, that's minor surgery." And you say, No. If it's my leg, it's major surgery. When it's your leg, it's minor surgery. If it's my leg, my back, it's major surgery. And so if it's my struggle or my trial, then it's a major issue. But think back on those things in your life, those struggles. What was the outcome of the situation? Did it prepare you for something in the future? Did it maybe help you appreciate something that you have? Did it help you appreciate maybe something that came after? Help you appreciate something that came because of that trial? Were you maybe better equipped to handle something else in the future? Were you able to maybe help someone else later who was going through something similar. And last I checked, that's part of being the church, helping one another through those struggles and trials. And in all of these situations, how did we respond? Did we turn inward and think, okay, I have to hunker down, I have to handle this myself, I have to take care of myself and only let myself in? Or did we turn outward and maybe through that trial rely on God more? Rely on God in those difficult times. Persevere with God. So it's amazing how when we face tough situations, more and more we find that we have to rely on God for strength. And so as we mature in our faith, part of maturing in our faith means that we have to show more responsibility in our relationships. But then we also, part of maturing in our faith means that we are going to have to face more. And we have to be ready for those moments when we have to persevere. We have to face more because we've matured through past situations, and we face situations now that we would have never been able to handle back when we were a child in our faith. And so we have to face more. And then the third more thing is that we have to do more with our faith. Matthew chapter 7, verse 24. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. Pretty common story. We know it from when we were a child. We've sung the song at VBS, rains came down and the floods came up. But notice the whole point for the song is hearing the words of Christ and putting them into practice. And he says, if we do not put these words into practice, then we are the foolish individual. We cannot become complacent in our faith. We cannot just think, all right, I've reached this point in my faith, I'm good from here on out, I can just coast for the next however many years. We cannot view our faith that, all right, I'm good, I'll just come here on a Sunday morning, sit in a seat, and then go home. But as we mature in our faith, there's this expectation that we will do more with our faith. That we will get up off our rear ends and do something. We will teach that class. We'll lead that ministry. We'll serve in this capacity. We'll help this individual. We'll share the gospel with this person. We will do more because we have matured in our faith. The key is that we grow and mature. We have to grow. We cannot just stay where we are. But if we are going to take that responsibility of growing, if we are like, yes, I'm going to grow from here on out, there are three things we must be ready for, and that is more responsibility. Being more responsible. We have to be ready to face more. Face those difficult times that will come ahead. And then also, third, we have to be ready to do more with our faith. So I know this hasn't been a lesson so much on necessarily the gospel, but there is definitely a starting point in our faith journey. We may not always know when we became an adult, but we know when we are born. And that birth begins when we enter into a relationship with Christ. And if you would like to begin that journey, if you would like to be born again through the waters of baptism, because you haven't begun that journey, or maybe you started that journey but you haven't been growing like you should, if there is anything we can do for you this evening, if we can help you in any way, please come now as we stand and sing.